Breaking: Jimmy USO just made the most controversial demand of Roman Reigns' career, and it could destroy the Bloodline forever. You are not going to believe what just happened backstage at WWE Raw. Jimmy USO, the man who has been Roman Reigns' most loyal soldier, the twin who sacrificed everything for the Bloodline, just walked up to the tribal chief and made a demand that has sent shockwaves through the entire WWE locker room. Jimmy is insisting that Roman Reigns add Jacob Fatu to the Bloodline immediately, and Roman's reaction is going to blow your mind. But here's what's making me absolutely furious right now, and I need you to tell me if I'm crazy for thinking this. Who does Jimmy USO think he is? Since when does anyone make demands of the tribal chief? Since when does a soldier tell the general what to do? Is Jimmy USO completely out of his mind, or is this actually the smartest thing he could possibly do right now? Drop your thoughts in the comments right now, because what I'm about to reveal is going to completely change how you see the Bloodline, Roman Reigns, and the entire power structure of WWE. And trust me, by the end of this video, you're either going to think Jimmy is a genius or you're going to think he just signed his own death warrant. Let me break down exactly what happened, why Jimmy is making this insane demand, and why Jacob Fatu joining the Bloodline could either be the greatest thing to ever happen to WWE or the beginning of the end for Roman Reigns' empire. According to multiple sources who were present backstage at Raw, Jimmy USO requested a private meeting with Roman Reigns. Now, that alone isn't unusual. Jimmy and Roman talk strategy all the time. But what happened in that meeting was anything but normal. Jimmy apparently came prepared with a full presentation. He had footage pulled up on his phone. He had statistics ready. He had talking points memorized. This wasn't a casual suggestion or a passing thought. Jimmy USO came to that meeting with the express purpose of convincing Roman Reigns that the Bloodline needs Jacob Fatu, and he wasn't taking no for an answer. For those who don't know who Jacob Fatu is, let me educate you real quick, because understanding his significance is crucial to grasping why this is such a massive deal. Jacob Fatu is part of the legendary Naomi wrestling family. He's the son of Sam Fatu, who wrestled as Tama and later as the Tonga Kid. Jacob is Roman's cousin, making him part of the same bloodline that includes The Rock, Yokozuna, Rikishi, Umaga, and of course, Roman, G, and Jimmy themselves. But Jacob Fatu isn't just another family member trying to ride the Naomi name to success. This man is a monster. At 6 feet tall and nearly 300 pounds of pure muscle, Jacob moves like someone half his size. He can hit moonsaults that would make Rey Mysterio jealous. He's got the power to throw opponents around like ragdolls. And he has a mean streak that makes him one of the most dangerous performers in wrestling today. Jacob has been dominating the independent wrestling scene for years, particularly in Major League Wrestling, where he held their World Heavyweight Championship for an absurd length of time. He's destroyed everyone put in front of him. He's main event shows across the country. And wrestling fans have been begging WWE to sign him for years. So why hasn't WWE already brought Jacob Fatu in? Why does Jimmy need to demand this? That's where things get complicated and incredibly fascinating. Here's a question I want you to answer honestly in the comments. Did you even know who Jacob Fatu was before this moment, or is this your first time hearing about him? The reason Jacob Fatu hasn't been in WWE yet, despite his obvious talent and family connections, comes down to a combination of factors. First, there have been contract situations with other promotions that made signing him complicated. Second, there have been questions about whether Jacob was ready for WWE's schedule and spotlight. And third, and perhaps most importantly, there's been the question of where exactly Jacob would fit in WWE's current landscape. But the real reason, the one that nobody wants to say out loud, is that Roman Reigns hasn't wanted him there. That's right. The tribal chief himself has reportedly been hesitant about bringing Jacob Fatu into WWE and specifically into the Bloodline. Why? Because Roman understands something that many people don't. Jacob Fatu is too good. Jacob is so talented, so charismatic, and so physically impressive that he doesn't come across as a soldier or an enforcer. He comes across as a star, as a potential main eventer, as someone who could realistically challenge Roman for leadership of the Bloodline and maybe even win that battle. Roman has spent years carefully constructing the Bloodline's hierarchy. Roman is the tribal chief, the undisputed leader. Solo Sikoa has been positioned as Roman's enforcer, the silent destroyer who follows orders. GUSO was the emotional heart who eventually couldn't take it anymore. And Jimmy has been the loyal brother who does whatever is necessary for the family. Adding Jacob Fatu disrupts that entire power structure. Because Jacob isn't going to be content being just another soldier. Jacob is going to want a prominent role. He's going to want to be featured. He's going to want moments that showcase his incredible abilities. And every moment Jacob gets is a moment that potentially takes away from Roman's spotlight. So for years, Roman has found reasons to not bring Jacob into the fold. He's made excuses about timing not being right, about wanting Jacob to develop more on the independents, about the Bloodline not needing additional members. But now Jimmy USO is forcing the issue. And the way he's doing it is absolutely brilliant and completely disrespectful at the same time. According to my sources, Jimmy laid out his argument to Roman like this: the bloodline is under attack from all sides. G is gone. Paul Heyman's loyalty is questionable after recent events. Solo Sikoa is capable, but he's just one man. Meanwhile, there are multiple wrestlers in WWE who want to take down Roman and the bloodline. Cody Rhodes has already defeated Roman at WrestleMania. Seth Rollins would love nothing more than to destroy his former Shield brother. Drew McIntyre has been vocal about wanting a piece of the bloodline. LA Knight is rising as a fan favorite who needs a huge feud. Even younger stars like Braun Breaker are being positioned for main event runs. The bloodline, which once seemed unstoppable, now looks vulnerable. And vulnerability is something a tribal chief cannot afford. Jimmy's argument is that Jacob Fatu solves multiple problems simultaneously. First, Jacob adds another elite-level talent to the bloodline's ranks, making them numerically stronger and more dangerous. Second, Jacob's presence sends a message to the entire WWE roster that the bloodline is still recruiting the best and most dangerous members of the family. Third, and this is the part that reportedly made Roman's jaw clench, Jacob can do things in the ring that Roman cannot do anymore. Let me ask you something, and be brutally honest in your answer. Do you think Roman Reigns is still at the peak of his in-ring abilities, or has his part-time schedule affected his performance? That third point is what makes this so controversial and potentially explosive. Jimmy essentially told Roman that he needs someone who can work a full-time schedule and deliver show-stealing performances night after night. Someone who can take the physical burden off Roman's shoulders while Roman focuses on being the character and the leader. On paper, that makes perfect sense. In reality, it's an insult. Because what Jimmy is really saying is, Roman, you're not enough anymore. You need help. You need someone younger, faster, and more capable to pick up your slack. Can you imagine how that must have landed with Roman Reigns? The man who has been WWE's top guy for over 3 years? The man who ended The Undertaker's WrestleMania streak? The man who has main event WrestleMania multiple times? Being told by his own cousin that he needs someone to compensate for his deficiencies? Roman's initial reaction, according to people who were there, was pure anger. He got in Jimmy's face and reminded him exactly who the tribal chief is. He reminded Jimmy that the bloodline exists because of Roman's vision and Roman's dominance. He reminded Jimmy that everything they've accomplished has been under Roman's leadership. But Jimmy didn't back down. And this is where the story gets absolutely fascinating, because it shows a side of Jimmy USO we haven't seen before. Jimmy reportedly stood his ground and told Roman that this isn't about ego, it's about survival. It's about ensuring that the bloodline remains dominant for years to come, not just months. It's about thinking long-term rather than just protecting Roman's feelings in the short term. Jimmy then played his trump card. He reminded Roman that G left the bloodline specifically because Roman's ego and need for control became more important than family unity. Jimmy asked Roman point blank, "Are you going to make the same mistake with me? Are you going to let your pride destroy this family again?" That had to cut deep. Because Roman knows that losing G was a massive blow, both personally and professionally. G was beloved by fans. G had become a single star in his own right. And when G walked away from the bloodline, it damaged Roman's aura of invincibility. If Jimmy walks away too? If both of the Usos abandon Roman? That's not just a crack in the bloodline's foundation. That's the foundation crumbling completely. And Jimmy knows he has this leverage. That's what makes this demand so calculated and potentially dangerous. Jimmy is essentially saying, give me what I want, or I'm gone too. And then you'll be left with just Solo Sikoa and your own stubborn pride. Here's what I need to know from you in the comments: is Jimmy USO right to pressure Roman like this? Or is he crossing a line that should never be crossed within the bloodline's hierarchy? Now let's talk about what Jacob Fatu himself brings to the table and why his addition to the bloodline would be an absolute game changer for WWE. First and foremost, Jacob is an incredible athlete. I'm not exaggerating when I say he might be the most athletically gifted big man in wrestling today. The things he can do at his size are absolutely ridiculous. Moonsaults, dive through the ropes. Rana's Jacob has a moveset that would be impressive for a cruiserweight, let alone someone who weighs nearly 300 pounds. Having that kind of athleticism in the bloodline would give them a completely different dimension. Right now, the bloodline's offense is based on power and intensity. Solo Sikoa is a bruiser. Roman hits hard and has great timing, but nobody in the bloodline is going to wow you with aerial moves or displays of pure athletic superiority. Jacob changes that instantly. Second, Jacob has the look and presence that WWE absolutely loves. He's covered in traditional Samoan tattoos. He has the physique of a superhero. His facial expressions and body language communicate danger and unpredictability. When Jacob stares someone down, you believe he's capable of anything. Third, and this is crucial, Jacob has credibility. Wrestling fans who follow the independent scene know exactly who Jacob Fatu is and what he's capable of. When WWE signs him and puts him in the Bloodline, it's not like they're introducing some unknown quantity and asking fans to accept him as a threat. Jacob comes with a built-in reputation as a destroyer, as someone who has dominated everywhere he's been. Fourth, Jacob's addition creates instant feuds and storylines. Imagine Jacob Fatu as part of the Bloodline going up against Cody Rhodes. Imagine Jacob being unleashed on Seth Rollins. Imagine Jacob in a War Games match representing the Bloodline. The possibilities are endless, and every single one of them is exciting. But here's the double-edged sword that Roman has to be thinking about. All of those positives for WWE and the Bloodline are potential negatives for Roman personally. Because every Jacob Fatu highlight is a moment where Roman isn't the center of attention. Every time fans chant for Jacob, they're not chanting for Roman. Every time Jacob delivers a show-stealing performance, it's a reminder that the Bloodline doesn't revolve solely around Roman anymore. And that's the existential crisis Roman is facing. Does he sacrifice some of his personal spotlight for the greater good of the Bloodline? Does he bring in someone who might eventually challenge his leadership? Or does he maintain absolute control and risk the Bloodline falling apart around him? This is the question that's going to define Roman's character moving forward. Is he truly the leader he claims to be, someone who puts family and the Bloodline above his own ego? Or is he the tyrant that G accused him of being, someone so obsessed with control that he'd rather rule over ashes than share power? Let me get your take on this. If you were Roman Reigns, would you add Jacob Fatu to the Bloodline knowing he might eventually challenge your authority, or would you refuse and maintain complete control? There's also another layer to this that we need to discuss, the fan reaction. Because WWE fans have been desperate for Jacob Fatu to sign with the company for years. Social media is constantly flooded with "Sign Jacob Fatu" tweets and posts. Wrestling forums discuss what Jacob could do in WWE. Everyone who knows about Jacob wants to see him on the biggest stage. So if Jimmy is successful in his demand and Jacob Fatu does join the Bloodline, the fan response is going to be absolutely insane. It's going to be one of the most celebrated signings in recent WWE history. Social media is going to explode with excitement. Wrestling media is going to cover it extensively. And suddenly the Bloodline is going to feel fresh and dangerous in a way it hasn't felt in months. But WWE and Roman have to be careful here. Because if they bring Jacob Fatu in and don't use him correctly, the backlash will be severe. Fans have expectations for what Jacob can do. If he's relegated to being just another generic member of the Bloodline who stands in the background while Roman talks, fans are going to riot. Jacob needs to be presented as a major threat from day one. He needs to be given opportunities to showcase his abilities. He needs to feel like an A-level addition to the Bloodline, not a B-level afterthought. And this brings us back to Roman's dilemma. Can he handle sharing the spotlight enough to let Jacob be Jacob? Or will Roman's need for control stifle Jacob's potential and waste this incredible opportunity? There's also the question of how Solo Sikoa feels about all of this. Solo has been Roman's enforcer and right-hand man. If Jacob comes in and starts taking some of Solo's responsibilities or getting more attention, how does Solo react? Does he welcome Jacob as family, or does he see Jacob as competition? The potential for internal conflict within the Bloodline is absolutely massive here. You could have Jimmy and Jacob forming an alliance separate from Roman and Solo. You could have Solo feeling threatened and taking that out on Jacob. You could have Roman trying to play them all against each other to maintain his power. Or, and this would be the healthiest option but probably the least likely given Roman's character, you could have the Bloodline actually function as a unified family where everyone has a role and everyone is valued. Here's another question for you. If Jacob Fatu joins the Bloodline, do you think it leads to unity and dominance, or does it create internal conflict that eventually destroys the faction from within? Let's also talk about the timing of Jimmy's demand because it's significant. Why is Jimmy pushing for this now? Why not months ago when the Bloodline was already showing cracks? Why not wait until after a major event or storyline conclusion? The timing suggests that Jimmy sees something coming. He understands that WWE's landscape is shifting. New stars are rising. Old stars are returning. The competition for main event spots is fiercer than ever. And if the Bloodline doesn't evolve and add new weapons to their arsenal, they're going to get left behind. Jimmy has always been the more strategic twin. While G was the emotional one who wore his heart on his sleeve, Jimmy has been the thinker, the planner, the one who looks 3 steps ahead. So when Jimmy insists that Jacob Fatu needs to be added now, it's because he's calculated that waiting any longer puts the Bloodline at a disadvantage they might not be able to overcome. There's also the personal element for Jimmy. He's watched his twin brother walk away from the Bloodline. He's probably questioned whether he should do the same. By demanding that Jacob be added, Jimmy is essentially saying, I'm still committed to this family, but only if we're serious about being the best. I'm not staying in a sinking ship just out of loyalty. That's a mature and reasonable position, but it's also one that challenges Roman's authority in a way that Roman has never tolerated before. Roman has always demanded absolute loyalty without conditions. Jimmy is now putting conditions on his loyalty. That's revolutionary within the Bloodline structure, and it could either save the faction or destroy it. Now let's discuss some potential scenarios for how this could play out on WWE programming, because there are multiple directions this could go. Scenario 1: Roman reluctantly agrees to bring Jacob Fatu into the Bloodline, but he does it on his terms. Jacob is introduced as Roman's newest weapon, someone who answers directly to the tribal chief. Roman makes it clear that Jacob's role is to destroy Roman's enemies, not to challenge Roman's leadership. Jacob accepts these terms initially, but over time, he starts to chafe under Roman's restrictions. This builds toward an eventual Jacob vs. Roman feud where the student challenges the master. Scenario 2: Roman flat-out refuses Jimmy's demand. This causes a rift between Roman and Jimmy that mirrors what happened with G. Jimmy starts openly questioning Roman's decisions. The tension builds until Jimmy ultimately makes a choice. Does he leave the Bloodline like G did, or does he stay and continue fighting for change from within? If both twins end up outside the Bloodline, that sets up the Usos versus the Bloodline as a major feud. Scenario 3: Roman agrees to bring Jacob in, but secretly plots to make Jacob fail. Roman gives Jacob impossible tasks. He sets Jacob up to lose important matches. He undermines Jacob's credibility so that Roman can then say, "See? This is why I didn't want him in the first place." This turns Roman into an even more villainous character and potentially drives Jimmy, Solo, and Jacob to unite against him. Scenario 4: Roman agrees to bring Jacob in and genuinely commits to making the Bloodline stronger through this addition. Jacob becomes a legitimate force, the Bloodline enters a new era of dominance, and for a while, everything works perfectly. But success breeds complacency and arrogance, which eventually leads to new conflicts down the line. Which scenario do you want to see happen? Or do you have a completely different idea for how this should play out? Tell me in the comments. There's also the very real possibility that Jacob Fatu himself has opinions about all of this. WWE presumably would have to negotiate a contract with him. Jacob would have to agree to join the Bloodline rather than coming in as a single star. He'd have to be willing to accept whatever role WWE has planned for him. Is Jacob Fatu willing to be part of Roman's faction, or does he want to come in as his own man and forge his own path? That's a legitimate question because Jacob has been the top guy wherever he's wrestled. He's been the world champion. He's been the main event. Asking him to be a supporting player in someone else's story might not be appealing, but the counterargument is that being part of the Bloodline gives Jacob instant credibility and exposure in WWE. He'd be featured on WWE's biggest shows immediately. He'd be in main event storylines from day one, and once he establishes himself, he could always branch out into singles competition. It's a risk-reward calculation that Jacob and WWE would have to work through carefully. Let me ask you this: if you were Jacob Fatu, would you want to join the Bloodline as a faction member, or would you prefer to come into WWE as a singles competitor building your own legacy? We should also discuss what this means for WWE's tag team division, because if Jimmy is focused on recruiting Jacob Fatu, does that mean the Usos as a tag team are done? Are we going to see Jimmy and Jacob form a new tag team? Or will Jimmy continue teaming with G outside of the Bloodline while Jacob operates as a singles competitor? The Usos are the greatest tag team of their generation and arguably one of the greatest of all time. Their chemistry is perfect. Their timing is impeccable. Their resume speaks for itself. It would be a shame to see that partnership end, even though both twins have proven they can be successful as singles competitors. But maybe adding Jacob creates a situation where you have three incredible talents who can mix and match as needed. Jimmy and Jacob could team 1 week. Jimmy and G could reunite for specific matches. Jacob could compete as a single star while Jimmy supports him. The flexibility would be valuable for WWE's booking. There's also the question of how this affects WWE's women's division, specifically Nia Jax, who is also part of the Anoa'i family and has aligned herself with the Bloodline at various points. Does Jacob's addition mean a full family reunion where everyone gets involved? Or is this specifically about the men's side of things? And what about other potential Anoa'i family members who could join WWE? Lance Anoa'i, Zilla Fatu, and others from the family have been training and working independent shows. If WWE opens the door to Jacob, does that mean others follow? Could we see an entire Anoa'i invasion that goes beyond just the Bloodline? The possibilities are endless, and that's what makes this such a compelling story. This isn't just about one wrestler joining one faction. This is potentially about the future direction of multiple storylines, characters, and even WWE's entire family-based storytelling approach. Here's my final question for you before we wrap this up: do you think WWE should expand the Bloodline into an even larger faction with multiple members, or should they keep it small and focused on just the core members? The bottom line is this: Jimmy USO has put Roman Reigns in an impossible position. By demanding that Jacob Fatu be added to the Bloodline, Jimmy is forcing Roman to choose between his ego and the Bloodline's future. He's forcing Roman to decide whether he's truly a leader who puts family first, or a tyrant who values control above all else. If Roman agrees, the Bloodline gets an incredible talent who could help them dominate WWE for years. But Roman also risks his position as the unquestioned leader and alpha of the faction. If Roman refuses, he might maintain his authority in the short term, but he risks losing Jimmy the same way he lost G. And a Bloodline without the Usos isn't really the Bloodline anymore. Jacob Fatu is the key to the Bloodline's future, but he's also potentially the catalyst for its destruction. How Roman handles this situation will define his legacy not just as tribal chief, but as a character in WWE history. So I need to know where you stand on this. Are you Team Jimmy, believing that Jacob Fatu needs to be added immediately for the Bloodline to survive? Or are you Team Roman, thinking that the tribal chief should maintain complete control over who joins his faction and when? Drop your answer in the comments right now. And while you're down there, tell me what you think Jacob Fatu's first feud should be if he joins WWE and the Bloodline. Who do you want to see him face? What match do you want to see him in? Make sure you smash the like button if you're excited about the possibility of Jacob Fatu joining the Bloodline. Subscribe to Wrestling Newsletter if you haven't already, because I'll have all the latest updates, news, and analysis as this story develops. And turn on those notifications so you don't miss a single update about the Bloodline, Roman Reigns, Jimmy USO, and Jacob Fatu. This is the beginning of something massive. The Bloodline is at a crossroads. Decisions made in the next few weeks are going to determine whether they rise to even greater heights or fall apart completely. And we're going to be here covering every single moment of it. The Bloodline reunion could be the greatest thing to happen to WWE this year, or it could be the beginning of the end. Either way, you don't want to miss what happens next.